poor man was accused by his madam's daughter, and he took his revenge 3 years later. Imagine working 16-hour days, 7 days a week, earning barely enough to survive, only to be accused of a crime you didn't commit by the daughter of the woman you serve. Imagine losing everything in a single moment because of a lie. Now imagine waiting 3 years, not for vengeance, but for the truth to reveal itself in the most unexpected way. This is the story of Samuel, a houseboy whose life was destroyed by a false accusation, and how karma found its way back to the woman who tried to ruin him. What happened 3 years later will leave you speechless. Hey everyone, if you enjoy stories about justice, karma, and the power of patience, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now. We share real-life stories that will move you, inspire you, and make you think. Don't miss out. Samuel was 24 years old when he first arrived at the Adeyemi household in the wealthy part of the city. He came from a small village where his parents were farmers struggling to make ends meet. Samuel was the oldest of 5 children, and when his father fell ill, the responsibility of providing for the family fell on his shoulders. He had completed secondary school but couldn't afford university, so he moved to the city with nothing but a small bag of clothes and the address of a distant cousin who promised to help him find work. That's how he ended up working for Mrs. Chioma Adeyemi, a wealthy widow who owned 3 successful boutiques across the city. The pay wasn't much, but it was enough to send money home and save a little for himself. Samuel worked as the houseboy, which meant he did everything: cooking, cleaning, gardening, running errands, and sometimes even driving Mrs. Adeyemi to church on Sundays. He didn't mind the work. In fact, he was grateful for it. Mrs. Adeyemi was a kind woman, soft-spoken and generous. She would often give him extra money during holidays and made sure he ate well. She treated him with respect, something Samuel hadn't expected from someone of her status. For the first year, life was good. Samuel woke up at 5 every morning, prepared breakfast, cleaned the house, and went about his duties with a smile on his face. He was building something slowly but surely. He had managed to save a little money, enough to send his younger brother to a technical school back in the village. But everything changed when Grace came home. Grace was Mrs. Adeyemi's only daughter, 26 years old, and had been living abroad for almost 8 years. She had gone to study business management and had stayed on to work for a marketing firm. But after losing her job, she decided to return home. Samuel remembered the day she arrived. Mrs. Adeyemi was so excited. She had been preparing for weeks. She redecorated Grace's room, bought new curtains, new bedding, even a new television. Samuel helped with all of it, carrying furniture, painting walls, making sure everything was perfect. When Grace finally walked through the door, Samuel was struck by how different she was from her mother. Where Mrs. Adeyemi was warm and welcoming, Grace was cold and distant. She barely acknowledged Samuel when they were introduced. She looked at him the way you might look at a piece of furniture, something that existed but didn't matter. Over the next few weeks, Samuel realized that Grace had returned home with a chip on her shoulder. She was bitter about losing her job, angry about having to come back, and she took that anger out on everyone around her, especially Samuel. She would complain about the food he cooked, saying it was too salty or not salty enough. She would leave messes around the house and then yell at him for not cleaning fast enough. She would call him at odd hours of the night to bring her water or adjust the air conditioning in her room. Samuel endured it all quietly. He needed the job, and he didn't want to cause trouble for Mrs. Adeyemi, who had been nothing but kind to him. But Grace seemed to enjoy making his life miserable. One afternoon, about 3 months after Grace had returned, Samuel was in the kitchen preparing lunch when Grace walked in. She leaned against the counter and watched him for a moment, her arms crossed. Then she spoke. "You know, Samuel, my mother trusts you a lot." Samuel looked up from the pot he was stirring and nodded. "Yes, Ma. She's been very good to me." Grace smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that made Samuel's stomach turn. That's good. Trust is important. But trust can also be dangerous, don't you think? One mistake, and everything can fall apart. Samuel didn't know what to say, so he just nodded again and went back to cooking. Grace watched him for a few more seconds, then turned and left the kitchen. That conversation stuck with Samuel for days. There was something about the way Grace had said those words, something that felt like a warning, or maybe a threat. 2 weeks later, Mrs. Adeyemi called Samuel into the living room. Her face was serious, and Grace was sitting on the couch with her arms folded, staring at him. Samuel's heart started to race. He had no idea what was going on, but he could feel that something was very wrong. Mrs. Adeyemi looked at him with sadness in her eyes and said, "Samuel, Grace says that 50,000 naira is missing from her room. She says she left it on her dresser this morning, and now it's gone. You were the only one who went into her room today to clean. Did you see the money?" Samuel felt like the ground had been pulled out from under him. His mouth went dry, and his hands started to shake. "No, ma. I didn't see any money. I cleaned the room just like I always do, but I didn't touch anything that wasn't mine. I would never steal from you or Miss Grace. Never." Grace leaned forward, her eyes cold and accusing. "Then where is the money, Samuel? You're the only one who went into my room. My mother wasn't home, and the gate was locked. So if you didn't take it, then who did?" Samuel's voice cracked as he spoke. "I don't know, Miss Grace, but I swear on my life, I didn't take your money. Please, you have to believe me." Mrs. Adeyemi looked torn. Samuel could see the conflict in her eyes. She wanted to believe him, but Grace was her daughter. "Samuel, I've trusted you for over a year now. I've never had any problems with you, but this is serious. If you took the money, just tell me now, and we can figure something out. I won't call the police if you return it." Samuel dropped to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "Ma, please, I didn't take anything. I'm begging you. I would never do this. You know me. You know I'm not a thief." Grace stood up, her voice sharp and final. "Mother, he's lying. The money was there this morning and now it's gone. He's the only one who could have taken it. If you don't do something about this, I will call the police myself." Mrs. Adeyemi closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them again, Samuel could see that she had made her decision. "Samuel, I think it's best if you leave. I'll give you your salary for this month, but I can't have you working here anymore." "I'm sorry." Samuel felt like his entire world had collapsed. He tried to speak, to plead his case one more time, but the words wouldn't come. He just stood there, tears rolling down his cheeks, as Mrs. Adeyemi handed him an envelope with his final pay. Grace watched the whole thing with a satisfied smirk on her face. That night, Samuel packed his few belongings and left the Adeyemi house. He had nowhere to go, so he stayed with his cousin in a cramped one-room apartment on the outskirts of the city. His cousin was kind enough to let him sleep on the floor, but Samuel could see the pity in his eyes. Word spread quickly in the small community of houseboys and domestic workers. Someone accused of stealing rarely found work again. Samuel spent weeks looking for another job, but every door was closed to him. No one wanted to hire someone with a reputation as a thief. His savings ran out quickly, and soon he couldn't send money home to his family. His mother called him, her voice filled with worry, asking why the money had stopped coming. Samuel couldn't bring himself to tell her the truth. He just said that things were difficult in the city and that he was looking for a better job. But deep down, he felt like a failure. He had let his family down, and there was nothing he could do about it. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Months passed, and Samuel's situation grew worse. He took odd jobs wherever he could find them. Washing cars, carrying loads at the market, anything to make a little money. But it was never enough. He was always hungry, always tired, always one step away from sleeping on the streets. The shame of being accused of theft weighed on him every single day. He thought about going back home to the village, but he couldn't face his family. How could he explain that he had failed them because of a lie? One night, about 6 months after he had been fired, Samuel was walking home from a construction site where he had spent the day carrying cement bags. His back ached, his hands were blistered, and his stomach growled with hunger. He passed by a church and heard singing from inside. He hadn't prayed in months, but something about the sound of those voices made him stop. He walked inside and sat in the back row, listening to the choir. The pastor was preaching about patience, about how God sees everything and how justice always finds its way to those who wait. Samuel didn't know if he believed it anymore, but he closed his eyes and whispered a prayer anyway. God, if you're listening, I just want my name cleared. I don't care about the money. I don't care about revenge. I just want people to know that I'm not a thief. 3 years passed. 3 long, painful years. Samuel eventually found work as a security guard at a small office building. The pay was barely enough to survive, but it was steady, and that was all that mattered. He lived in a tiny room with no electricity, cooking his meals on a small charcoal stove. He had lost weight, his clothes were worn out, and his once bright eyes had become dull with exhaustion. But he hadn't given up. He still sent a little money home whenever he could, even if it was just a few hundred naira. His mother never stopped praying for him, and that kept him going. Samuel rarely thought about Grace or Mrs. Adeyemi anymore. The pain of that day had faded into a dull ache, something he had learned to live with. He had accepted that life was unfair and that sometimes bad things happen to good people for no reason. But then, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. Samuel was standing at his post outside the office building when he saw a woman walking down the street. She was thin, almost skeletal, and her clothes were dirty and torn. Her hair was matted and she was barefoot. She was begging, holding out a trembling hand to passers-by, most of whom ignored her. Samuel felt a pang of sympathy. He knew what it was like to have nothing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a 50 naira note, one of the few he had left until payday. He walked over to her and held it out. Here, take this. The woman looked up at him and Samuel froze. Even though her face was gaunt and her eyes were hollow, he recognized her immediately. It was Grace. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Grace stared at him, her expression blank, as if she didn't recognize him. But then, slowly, recognition dawned in her eyes. Her face crumpled, and she started to cry. Samuel? Her voice was barely a whisper. Samuel didn't know what to say. He just stood there, holding out the 50 naira note. Grace took it with shaking hands and then collapsed to her knees, sobbing.
I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry. Samuel finally found his voice. What happened to you? Grace wiped her tears with the back of her hand, but they kept coming. Everything fell apart after you left. My mother got sick. Cancer. She died 8 months after you were fired. I inherited everything, the house, the businesses, the money, but I didn't know how to manage any of it. I made bad investments, trusted the wrong people. Within a year, I lost everything. The house was seized, the boutiques closed down. I had nothing left. I tried to find work, but no one would hire me. I've been living on the streets for the past year. Samuel felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of him wanted to feel satisfaction, to see this as some kind of cosmic justice. But mostly he just felt sad. Why did you do it, Grace? Why did you lie about the money? Grace covered her face with her hands, her whole body shaking. Because I was jealous. I was jealous of how much my mother trusted you, how she talked about you like you were part of the family. I felt like I was being replaced. I wanted her to see you the way I saw you, as just a houseboy, someone beneath us. So I hid the money and blamed you. I never thought it would destroy your life. I never thought it would destroy mine either. Samuel stood there, looking down at this broken woman who had once held so much power over him. He thought about all the pain she had caused him, all the nights he had gone to bed hungry, all the times he had cried because he felt worthless. He thought about his family and how he had let them down because of her lie. But he also thought about the pastor's words from that night in the church. Justice always finds its way to those who wait. He took a deep breath and said, I forgive you, Grace. Grace looked up at him, her eyes wide with shock. What? Samuel repeated, his voice steady. I forgive you. What you did was wrong, and it hurt me more than you'll ever know. But holding on to anger won't change what happened. You're suffering now, and I can see that. I don't wish more pain on you. Grace broke down completely, sobbing so hard that she could barely breathe. Samuel reached down and helped her to her feet. There's a shelter 2 streets from here. They give food and a place to sleep. Go there. Tell them Samuel sent you. As Grace walked away, stumbling and crying, Samuel watched her go. He didn't feel triumphant. He didn't feel vindicated. He just felt tired. But he also felt something else, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. That evening, Samuel sat in his small room, eating a simple meal of rice and beans. He thought about everything that had happened, about how life had come full circle in the strangest way possible. He pulled out his phone and called his mother. When she answered, her voice was filled with warmth. Samuel, my son, how are you? Samuel smiled for the first time in years.
이모케아이, Mama.
I'm going to be okay. Now let me ask you something. If you were in Samuel's position, would you have been able to forgive Grace? Or would you have walked away and let her suffer? Think about it. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is to show mercy to someone who has hurt you deeply. But maybe that's what separates us from the people who wrong us. Maybe forgiveness isn't about them at all. Maybe it's about freeing ourselves from the weight of bitterness and anger. Samuel could have gloated. He could have reminded Grace of everything she had taken from him. But he chose a different path. He chose to be the bigger person, even when he had every right to be angry. 3 months after that encounter, Samuel received a phone call from an unknown number. When he answered, a man's voice spoke. Is this Samuel? Samuel was cautious. Yes, who's asking? The man introduced himself as Mr. Okafor, a lawyer. I'm calling on behalf of the late Mrs. Chioma Adeyemi. Before she passed away, she left specific instructions in her will regarding you. She wanted to make sure you were taken care of, but due to some complications with her estate, we've only just been able to process this. She left you a sum of 2 million naira and a letter. Can we arrange a time for you to come to my office? Samuel was speechless. 2 million naira? He could barely comprehend it. He agreed to meet the lawyer the following day. When Samuel arrived at the lawyer's office, Mr. Okafor handed him an envelope with the letter and a bank draft for 2 million naira. Samuel's hands trembled as he opened the letter. It was written in Mrs. Adeyemi's handwriting. The letter read, Dear Samuel, if you are reading this, then I am no longer in this world. I want you to know that I never stopped thinking about what happened. After you left, I found the money Grace claimed was stolen. It had fallen behind her dresser. She never told me, and when I confronted her, she admitted that she had lied. I was heartbroken. I tried to find you, to bring you back and apologize, but you had disappeared. I failed you, Samuel, and I am deeply sorry. You were like a son to me, and I should have believed you. I hope this money can help you build the life you deserve. Please forgive an old woman who made a terrible mistake. With love and regret, Mrs. Chioma Adeyemi. Samuel sat in that office and cried. He cried for Mrs. Adeyemi, who had tried to make things right but never got the chance. He cried for himself and for all the years he had suffered because of a lie. But most of all, he cried because he finally felt seen. Someone had believed him. Someone had known the truth. With the 2 million naira, Samuel's life began to change. He moved into a decent apartment, bought new clothes, and started a small business selling phone accessories at a market stall. It wasn't much, but it was honest work, and it was his. He sent a substantial amount of money home to his family, enough to repair their house and pay for his younger siblings' education. His mother cried tears of joy when she received it, thanking God for answering her prayers. But Samuel didn't forget about Grace. A few weeks after receiving the money, he went looking for her at the shelter he had directed her to. He found her there, looking slightly better than before. She had gained a little weight, and her eyes weren't as hollow. When she saw him, she looked down in shame. Samuel sat down next to her and said, I'm not here to judge you, Grace. I'm here because I want to help you. Grace looked at him in disbelief. Help me? After everything I did to you? Samuel nodded. Your mother left me some money. She knew the truth about what you did, and she tried to make things right. I think she would want me to help you, Not because you deserve it, but because everyone deserves a second chance. He pulled out an envelope and handed it to her. Inside was 50,000 naira. This should be enough to get you back on your feet. Use it to find a place to stay, get some decent clothes, and look for work. Don't waste it. Grace took the envelope, her hands shaking. Why are you doing this? Samuel stood up and looked her in the eye. Because forgiveness isn't just about words. It's about action. And because I don't want to become the kind of person who holds on to bitterness for the rest of his life. What you did was wrong, but you've paid for it. Now it's time for you to rebuild. As Samuel walked away, Grace called out to him. Samuel, thank you. And I promise, I'll make something of myself. I won't let your kindness go to waste. Samuel turned back and gave her a small smile. I hope you do, Grace. I really do. Over the next year, Samuel's business grew. He expanded from 1 stall to 3, hired a few employees, and became well known in the market for his fair prices and honest dealings. People respected him, and he built a reputation as someone who could be trusted. He never told anyone about what had happened with Grace or about the money Mrs. Adeyemi had left him. That was his story, and he carried it quietly. One day, about a year after he had helped Grace, Samuel was at his main stall when a well-dressed woman walked up. Took him a moment to recognize her. It was Grace. She looked completely different. Her hair was neat, she had gained weight, and she was wearing clean, professional clothing. She smiled at him, a genuine smile. Hello, Samuel. Samuel smiled back. Grace, you look well. She nodded. I am. I got a job at a call center, nothing fancy, but it's steady. I've been saving money, and I'm renting a small room. I'm taking things one day at a time, but I'm building something real. I wanted to come here and thank you again. What you did for me, I'll never forget it. Samuel shook his head. You don't have to thank me, Grace. You did the work. You turned your life around. That was all you. Grace's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away. I also wanted to tell you something. I've been going to therapy, trying to work through my issues. I realize now that I hurt you because I was hurting. That doesn't excuse what I did, but I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to be someone my mother would have been proud of. Samuel reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. Your mother loved you, Grace. She never stopped loving you, even after she found out the truth. And I think she would be proud of the person you're becoming. Grace nodded, unable to speak. After a few moments, she composed herself and said, If there's ever anything I can do for you, anything at all, please let me know. Samuel smiled. Just keep moving forward. That's all I ask. If you've been watching this story and it's touched your heart in any way, please consider subscribing to our channel. We bring you real stories about real people. Stories that remind us of the power of forgiveness, resilience, and the human spirit. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. 5 years after Samuel was first accused, he stood in front of a small building that he had just purchased. It was going to be his first permanent shop, a real store where he could sell electronics and phone accessories. He had come a long way from the broken, desperate man who had begged on his knees in Mrs. Adeyemi's living room. He had rebuilt his life brick by brick, and now he was standing on the foundation of something solid. As he looked at the building, Samuel thought about everything that had happened. He thought about Grace and how she had destroyed his life with a single lie. He thought about Mrs. Adeyemi and her letter, the apology that had come too late but had meant everything. He thought about the 3 years of suffering, the hunger, the shame, the feeling of being worthless. But most of all, he thought about the choice he had made to forgive. Revenge would have been easy. When he saw Grace on the street, broken and begging, he could have walked past her. He could have laughed in her face, reminded her of what she had done, and left her there to suffer. That would have been his revenge, and no one would have blamed him for it. But Samuel knew that revenge wouldn't have healed him. It wouldn't have given him back the years he lost. It wouldn't have made him feel whole again. What healed him was the choice to let go, to forgive, and to move forward. That was his real victory, not seeing Grace suffer, but refusing to let her actions define the rest of his life. Samuel pulled out his phone and called his mother. When she answered, he could hear the smile in her voice. "Samuel, my son." He smiled too. "Mama, I bought a shop today. A real shop. I'm going to make you proud." His mother's voice cracked with emotion. "My son, I've always been proud of you. Even when things were hard, even when you had nothing, I was proud because you never gave up. You're a good man, Samuel. A good man." As Samuel hung up the phone, he felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. He felt hope. Not just hope for a better future, but hope that good things could still happen to good people even after the worst had passed. That evening, as Samuel locked up the shop and headed home, he passed by the church where he had prayed all those years ago. He stopped and looked at the building, remembering that desperate prayer he had whispered in the dark. "God, if you're listening, I just want my name cleared." That prayer had been answered, not in the way he expected, but in a way that was better than anything he could have imagined. His name had been cleared, his life had been restored, and he had found peace. As Samuel walked home that night, he realized something important. This story wasn't really about revenge at all. It was about resilience. It was about holding onto your integrity even when the world tries to strip it from you. It was about the power of forgiveness, not because the person who hurt you deserves it, but because you deserve to be free. Samuel had waited 3 years for justice, but what he received was something far more valuable. He received his life back, and he received the knowledge that he had faced the worst and come out stronger on the other side. Grace had taken everything from him with a lie, but in the end, the truth had won. Not because Samuel fought for it, but because the truth has a way of rising to the surface, no matter how deep you try to bury it. So let me ask you again, and I really want you to think about this. If you were Samuel, could you have forgiven Grace? Could you have helped the person who destroyed your life when you saw them broken and desperate? Most of us would probably say no. Most of us would want that person to suffer the way we suffered. But Samuel chose a different path, and that choice changed everything. It changed him, it changed Grace, and it became a testament to the kind of person he truly was. This story teaches us that revenge might feel satisfying in the moment, but it doesn't heal us. It doesn't make us whole. Forgiveness does. Moving forward does. Choosing to be the bigger person, even when it's the hardest thing in the world, that's what truly sets us free. Samuel's story is a reminder that life can be cruel and unfair, that people can hurt us deeply, and that sometimes we suffer for things we didn't do. But it's also a reminder that how we respond to that suffering defines us. We can choose bitterness or we can choose grace. We can choose revenge or we can choose forgiveness. And sometimes, the most powerful revenge is simply living well and refusing to let someone else's actions destroy our spirit. Before we end, I want to ask you one more thing. Have you ever been falsely accused of something? Have you ever been in a situation where someone lied about you and it cost you dearly? If you have, how did you handle it? Did you fight back? Or did you walk away? And more importantly, were you able to forgive? Share your story in the comments below. Let's create a community where we support each other and learn from each other's experiences. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if this video moved you, if Samuel's story touched your heart, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We have so many more stories like this. Stories about real people facing real challenges and finding their way through. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thank you for watching, and remember, no matter what you're going through right now, no matter how unfair life seems, there is always hope. There is always a way forward. And sometimes the best revenge is simply being happy, being successful, and being at peace with yourself. Take care, and we'll see you in the next video.